Welcome. Welcome to this gathering, whether you are joining us in this room or joining us online. This is a place where you have a place. You have a place here in this circle in a beloved community of fellow seekers, and you are welcome, and you are essential to the spiritual community we seek to create with one another, whatever our ages, our gender, or beyond the binaries of gender, whatever our sexual orientation or gender identity, whatever our race, our ethnicity, our religion or none, whatever our search, this is a safe place for each of us, for our laughter and our tears, for our questions and our fears, for our amazement and our wonder, for our joy and for our serenity. And together we seek to open in this time to all that it holds for us as we honor this season in our spiritual tradition that begins Holy Week with Palm Sunday. And we gather in this week with one another again on Friday evening. We invite you to be part of this circle. We have a slide reminding us of the time that we're gathering at 7 o'clock here in the evening. It will be a time with instrumental music and choir, a quiet, reflective time to explore the beauty of courage. And then we'll come together on Sunday morning, as we usually do at 10 o'clock, seeking beauty and resilience, a celebrative spiritual gathering, again with special music, as we welcome spring and we celebrate the resilience of the human spirit and human community. We hope that you'll be with us as we gather next weekend. David, I believe you have an invitation for some... We've been getting here, and now it's time to be here and to honor the gift we have in this day. We sing ourselves into its promise and into our promise.
We gather in gratitude for who we are together, for this place, for this land, for the inheritance that we share with our Treaty 6 brothers and sisters, our Métis friends, and all who call this land their ancestral and adopted home. In this time, may we always gather with gratitude. May we do so knowing that the presence of who we have been, who we know, who we connect with, who we build relationships with, that continues to enrich us as a community, as a city, as a people of the land. And so it's for this reason and many others that we can light this candle, for our gratitude. Grateful for light this morning. The light that greets us just a few minutes earlier every morning. The light that shines at the center of our solar system. The light that shines in the lives of those past and present. The light that shines in each of us as we recognize the connections in and between us. We're grateful for this lighted candle as we center ourselves around it, because it reminds us to live lives that brighten in all that we do and all that we say. We're grateful for this symbol in our center, for the way it reminds us to be lights with each other as we stand with one another, both in celebration and in protest and solidarity. The way this light reminds us that we are connected to each other, to allow the values of our best humanity to shine in all the actions we take as citizens, as human beings, today and through this week ahead. Grateful for this light as a symbol. Today we each entered the room receiving another symbol. An old story in our tradition will be told today. It's a story of protest and a story of resistance. The story of an old parade on this Palm Sunday. And as we sing this next song, which tells the story in its own way, we'll honor the tradition of this day to take a symbol of protest and hold it, or we might choose to wave it. If you'd like to conduct the musicians in your own beat with it, much like that. Or to be invited to take it and keep it as a reminder that every society needs deep care for the least among them. That each of us needs deep compassion for the fringes of our society. That each of us needs deep solidarity with those at greatest risk. That our protest, our resistance, our presence is all wrapped up in who we are and what we wish to be about. In the spirit of that symbol and that ethic, may we raise our palms and our stories of this morning and be reminded of our commitments to justice. Let's sing. I want to welcome anyone who wants to come to the carpet for a time for all ages to make your way here. Now is the time. I have a story to tell. Good morning, everyone. Come on, have a sit down. The story today is called Farmer Duck. It's by Martin Waddell and Helen Oxenbury. I might need your help to tell this story. You know what a duck says, right? Wow. Right. Okay. So you know everything you need to know. Ready? There once was a duck who had the bad luck to live with a lazy old farmer. The duck did the work, and the farmer stayed in bed all day. The duck fetched the cow from the field. "How goes the work?" called the farmer. And the duck answered, "Quack." Yeah. It's the only thing he can say. The duck brought the sheep from the hill. "How goes the work?" called the farmer. And the duck answered, "Quack." The duck put the hens in their house. "How goes the work?" called the farmer. And the duck answered, "Quack." The farmer got fat through staying in bed, and the poor duck got fed up with working all day. "How goes the work?" "Quack." Look, sawing logs. "How goes the work?" "Quack." Digging the weeds. Oops, I skipped a page. Hold on. "How goes the work?" "Quack." Picking apples. "How goes the work?" "Quack." He has to get all the eggs in a basket. Soon, the poor duck grew sleepy and weepy and tired. Oh. The hens and the cow and the sheep got very upset. They loved the duck, so they held a meeting under the moon, and they made a plan for the morning. "Moo," said the cow. "Baa," said the sheep. "Cluck," said the hens, and that was the plan. Do you like their plan? I don't know what it means, but they do. It was just before dawn, and the farmyard was still quiet. Through the back door and into the house crept the cow and the sheep and the hens. They snuck down the hall. They creaked up the stairs. Do you know what's going to happen? They squeezed under the bed of the farmer, and they wriggled about, and the bed started to rock. And the farmer woke up, and he called, "How goes the work?" And moo, baa, cluck. They lifted his bed as he started to shout, and they banged and they bounced the old farmer about and about and about right out of the bed. And he fled with the cow and the sheep and the hens mooing and baaing and clucking behind him. Down the lane, moo. Through the fields, baa. Over the hill, cluck, cluck. And he never came back. Now the duck awoke in the morning and waddled, tired, into the yard, expecting to hear the old words, "How goes the work?" But nobody spoke. Then the cow and the sheep and the hens came back. The duck said, "Yes." The cow said, "Moo." The sheep said, "Baa." The hen said, "Cluck," which told the duck the whole story. Then mooing and baaing and clucking and quacking, they all set to work on their farm. It's their farm now. That's the end. What? Was that a surprise ending? Okay, well, I want to talk to you about it. Because it's nice to read a story, but then Chris always has something to say, right? Okay, so on this farm, things were not fair. Did you notice that? That it wasn't fair? The farmer stayed in bed, made the duck do everything. He is a farmer. You'd think he would do some stuff. Yeah. When something doesn't seem fair, when something doesn't seem right, when a friend is in trouble, when a friend is being treated badly or unfairly, this book teaches us that we can't leave them by themselves. We can't leave them to deal with it all by themselves. It's not just their problem. It's not just the duck's problem. All the animals wanted to help the duck. So being a friend means we're not going to let our friends deal with problems by themselves. We're not going to let them be alone. We're going to find a way together. Just like those sheep and the cow and all the hens, they found a way, they made a plan to stand with their friend, to make it right for all of them. So that's what we do as friends. We're together. We don't leave each other alone because we know that we can help them. So, quack to you. Let's remember that we can always be good friends, okay? We'll always be good friends when we help each other. How about a bit of kid spirit? There's still some ducks in this room. They're quacking around. There's kid spirit. There's our toy room. There's youth cafe this morning. You're welcome to go wherever you'd like to go, okay?
Today we hear words that come from Thomas Merton. He was a contemplative and he was an activist. He was a Trappist monk who wrote more than 60 books, lived from 1915 until 1968. Many have described him as the most significant Catholic writer of our century, and as the conscience of the 1960s peace movement. He saw the two most important issues of his day to be issues of race and issues of peace. He was a deep believer in the potential and in the value of nonviolent civil resistance. These are his words that come from his writing entitled "We Are Already One." I stand among you as one who offers a small message of hope. That first, there are always people who dare to seek on the margin of society, who are not dependent on social acceptance, not dependent on social routine, and prefer a kind of free-floating existence under a state of risk. And among these people, if they're faithful to their own calling, to their vocation, to their own message, communication on the deepest level is possible. And the deepest level of communication is not communication, but communion. It is wordless, it is beyond words, and it is beyond speech and beyond concept. In the words of this activist, we're going to sing a little round with one another that Deb and Pam are going to help us enter so that we can sing it as a round. And I'll just invite you, Deb, to tell us how to do this.
Good morning, everyone. Pam and I are going to help lead the round, and we wanted to help you do it in a way that you felt comfortable, so we're going to divide into 3 parts. We'll have this section, a middle section. I think maybe this should be all of this 3rd section. And then I wanted to point out the slide so you can understand this roadmap. So you sing all the way through the piece, and each time we repeat it, substitute where the stars are. So first time through, you would say, "As we seek justice for all people." And the next time would be freedom, and then equality. So we keep substituting. Pardon me. I think you'll recognize the piece very quickly. So we wanted to give you a chance to sing through it a couple of times. So Katie, if we'll go through it a couple of times together, all on the same verse, the first verse. One time. Okay, Katie will play one time through. Then we'll sing it twice. Then this group will carry on your own. You've got lots of strong singers. It's the choir section today, so we're counting on you. And then I'll start this section when it's our turn to come in, and we just keep singing all the way through. And then Pam, you'll cue the 3rd part. Okay, please go ahead, Katie. One more time. Loving, passionate life, strong and vibrant in us, as we seek justice for all people.
All four writers that give us stories of the life of Jesus tell us this story about Jesus coming into the city of Jerusalem, and they all place it in the days leading up to his death. Many had hoped that he would be the one who would usher in a new Jewish political state and free people from Roman rule. And others were threatened by the popularity of his teaching among the poor and vulnerable. This is a reading from the earliest of those four writers, from the Gospel of Mark, likely written sometime between 66 and 70 of the Common Era, and written against the backdrop of the time of the Jewish revolt against Rome, when the temple and much of the city of Jerusalem was destroyed by the Roman army. This is Mark's story. When Jesus and his followers were approaching Jerusalem, and when they were near the Mount of Olives, Jesus sent two of his disciples and said to them, "Go into the village ahead of you, and when you enter it, immediately there you'll find a colt that has never been ridden. Untie it and bring it to me. And if anyone says to you, 'Why are you doing this?' just say, 'My teacher needs it, and we'll send it back here immediately.'" The disciples went away and found a colt tied near a door outside in the street. And as they were untying it, some of the bystanders said to them, "What are you doing, untying this colt?" They told them what Jesus had said, and they allowed them to take it. The disciples brought the colt to Jesus and threw their coats on it, and he sat on it. Others spread their coats on the road, and others spread leafy branches that they had cut in the fields. And those who went ahead of them were singing, "Hosanna, Hosanna! Blessed is the one who comes. Blessed is the coming kingdom of our ancestor David. Hosanna." Jesus entered Jerusalem and went into the temple. And when he saw everything, it was already late. He went back to Bethany with his followers. In this story of resistance passed down to us from the first century, billions of dollars are spent to produce products and services that promise to make us feel and look more beautiful. And billions of dollars are spent on creating and selling us an image of what beauty is said to be. Billions of dollars are spent to entice us to visit the beautiful places of the world. But what if beauty is something more than this? What if beauty is not just in the eye of the beholder? What if beauty is more than skin deep? What if beauty is something more subversive? What if a low-tech, no-budget piece of street theater can be one of the most beautiful things in the world? What if we could see something beyond a sweet, smiling Sunday school Jesus spilling over on a small donkey surrounded by some peasants staging a mock coronation? What if we could see the beauty of the creativity that's at work here in the world of the story? It's a smart piece of street theater, premised on the truth that you can attract more flies with honey than vinegar. You can expose more truth with satire than with force. But we've domesticated this first century story when we make it pretty and about just waving palms and a red carpet of cloaks, while we fail to see that what has come to town here is a highly political expression of what is broken in their society. Those who made their way from Bethany on a borrowed donkey are mocking the cruel realities of life as subjects in an empire. And they're staging a very rudimentary protest. At the same time that Rome is entering their city from the other side of town, with the governor riding on his favorite war horse in the company of soldiers, and they're making their way to Pilate's fortress, this little band of peasants are marching with their teacher on a borrowed donkey. Their little performance piece took some advanced planning to secure the necessary props. A little grassroots organizing to come together and walk together and stand together against the corruption of their temple and its complicity with the domination system. And any community organizer will tell you that timing is everything. There's no coincidence here about the venue or the timing of this parody. It was performed on the road from Bethany to Jerusalem. It's staged to capitalize on peak season at the temple and high season in the city. It's the perfect opportunity to communicate a message not only to the religious leaders, but to their bedfellows, the political Roman leaders who are all going to be in town for Passover. Just like this time every year, Caesar's highest-ranking civil servant will come to town so he can be the eye in the sky as the pilgrims arrive for the big religious festival. He's there to enforce law and order in the city as it swells from some 40,000 residents to over 200,000 pilgrims. And of course, any emperor is going to get a bit edgy when pilgrims come to reenact their freedom from an earlier regime. They're celebrating their liberation from Pharaoh's Egypt generations earlier. It wouldn't be rocket science to make the leap from celebrating one liberation to seeking another. But unlike that main stage event, This little fringe festival act doesn't go to Herod's palace, or it doesn't go to Pilate's fortress. It doesn't go to the soldiers' garrison. The borrowed ass and its rider go straight to the temple. But did you notice? Jesus and his friends don't exploit that stage to incite the soldiers by burning an effigy of Pilate or Caesar. He doesn't ascend the steps of the temple and make a speech rallying the peasants into a confrontation with the military who's in town. He doesn't try to stage a riot. He just brilliantly mocks the power of empire and the foolishness of its religious collaborators without saying a word. And it teaches us a thing or two about the beauty of resistance. And the beauty of this act of protest is that it wasn't really about results. It wasn't going to change the world. It wasn't going to upend the empire. It wasn't going to close down the temple. It wasn't going to deconstruct the empire. It wasn't going to fix the corruption of the temple. But nonetheless, it was an expression of faithfulness to critique the ugly and cruel realities that were destroying life and eroding hope for the most vulnerable in their society. This first century story of a march on the temple is one of those stories that should come with a disclaimer. In little italics before the story, it should say something like, "Now, I don't know whether this ever happened, or whether it happened this way, but I know this story is true." What makes a story true? Whether it's the creation of human imagination, or whether it's our observation, doesn't really matter. Whether a story tells history or parable, or some part of each, doesn't really matter. A story is true when it tells us something about the truth of life. We're not all born to heroic acts. We're not all born to be history makers. But we are each born with the potential to make a difference to someone or something. We have the capacity to do something rather than nothing. We have the capacity to remain creative in the face of all that seeks to erode the best of our humanness. We all have that capacity of which Thomas Merton speaks, the capacity to dare to stand on the margins, to refuse to be dependent on those things that are socially acceptable, or as Martin Luther King Jr. said, to be creatively maladjusted to injustice, to resist being dependent on social routine and receive our lives as existence always under a state of risk. This little parody we've turned into Palm Sunday isn't about someone powerful and famous turning the tide of history. It's about a few very ordinary folk, inspired by a good leader, praying with their feet, creatively confronting the problem, the system, challenging the dominant narrative, refusing to offer their thoughts and prayers, but taking their bodies and giving creative expression to a counter-narrative in the streets. And in a way, in a very small way, reconstituting the world with a glimpse of something else that's possible. And it's a story that invites us to create beauty with our resistance in confronting the deepest injustices of our own time, to subvert ugliness with the beauty of our creative resistance, whether it's something as simple as refusing to buy products that are manufactured unethically, or in harm of others, or in harm of the earth. Simple, everyday things each of us can do to raise our protest at whatever temples of corruption and collusion oppress our most vulnerable citizens. The temples, the policies, the priorities that exploit the human and the more than human, the air, the soil, the water upon which all of our life depends. This is a story that calls us to expose with satire and irony and good humor the indefensibleness of exploitation in whatever form it comes, seeking to peacefully subvert power, embarrassing the emperors who are wearing clothes that were taken off someone else's back, to make an ass of the systems that are failing us. And ours is a time that calls for unprecedented beauty of our creativity. A time in which we need fewer soldiers and more artists. A time for imagination and ingenuity. For the beautiness of cleverness that disarms like a fist in a velvet glove, a punchline, an embarrassing truth that can be best spoken without words, or in satire or parody or poetry or stand-up comedy or theater or music. If our creativity were to take to the streets, imagine the conversations we could provoke. Imagine what we might expose and envision. Imagine the beauty that isn't an image or an industry, but is the simple, peaceful acts of those who dare to point to a truth, and sometimes without saying a word.
make a brand new start and watch the walls come tumbling down. OCM, we are all family. OCM, we're all the same.
For everyone who would build a wall to exclude or to barrier, there are many more there ready to take a brick from the wall. We go to be a part of that collective energy, that light in the world, that hope, that spark of possibility. We go to do what we can in the beauty of our resistance, to be the change we seek in the world.
Sacredness